Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Today's Wednesday, Hump Day, September 21st, 2022. And we've got a lot of different things going on here, including a collar that's out of control. My collar is out of control. All right. Well, we've got a lot of great news today. The big news today, of course, is the lawsuit that was dropped today by Letitia James. Not dropped, filed today. By Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, against Donald Trump, his adult children, and the Trump Organization, as well as a few other entities for fraud involving lenders, insurance, tax assessments, really the whole gamut. And she also provided criminal referral to the Department of Justice in Manhattan, as well as a referral to the IRS for tax fraud. And this is very interesting. We've been following this story for quite a long time. She's been holding depositions. This was the deposition in which Donald Trump famously said that, famously took the fifth something like 400 times. And the reason why is because Alvin Bragg in Manhattan DA's office is still got an ongoing criminal investigation, and he didn't want to give any he didn't want to inadvertently give any incriminating statements there. Now, that's going to be more difficult to pull off in a civil lawsuit, which is probably why Letitia James is taking that approach. But it's still curious. And I mean, we haven't seen the full case. All we've seen is the indictment, and even that is somewhat dense and cryptic on some points here. But she's basically alleging that Donald Trump manipulated assessments and appraisals in order to defraud lenders, his insurers, the property taxes, possibly income taxes, all of which is, certainly possible. There may be a case there. I'm not going to, necessarily poo-poo that, but it does raise questions, which I raised today. And I've raised them before in this, which is, if Donald Trump defrauded his lenders, why aren't his lenders suing him? I mean, the lenders aren't suing him because Donald Trump's paying the bills. He's making his payments. He's paid off a number of the loans that were, in question already. And so the lenders are whole. I'm not aware that there's been any insurance conversions on the basis of inflated appraisals, but if there were, again, the insurance companies would sue on that behalf. And the tax issues are a little bit different, right? Because, obviously, that's more in the standing of an attorney general, but I don't understand why the attorney general is suing on behalf of lenders and insurers that don't seem inclined to sue on their own. That doesn't make a lot of sense. That's a little puzzling. Certainly, governments can sue corporations and officers of corporations over unfair business practices, and I think that that's the framing that you see here. But unless you have actual victims that are willing to join the lawsuit, it doesn't make a lot of sense other than as a political stunt. The tax appraisal thing is, I think, a little bit more of a tricky issue, but, and especially when it comes to the IRS and income taxes, because generally those types of appraisals are self-reported, right? But not property taxes, which apparently is part of what Letitia James is arguing here, which is that he misrepresented the square footage on some of the properties in order to either inflate assessments or deflate assessments, and that had impacts on property tax. But I mean, property tax assessments don't usually rely on self-reporting. Usually you have an assessor that comes out, takes a look, takes the measurements, and assesses it at market value. And if anything, most people would complain that the assessments are too large. Nobody's going to complain that their assessment is too small, by the way. I mean, nobody does that. So I'm not sure what the mechanism here is for the property tax aspects of the fraud. Now, if there's income tax or capital gains tax fraud, then that makes some sense. But again, the tax authorities that regulate that collect those taxes should have acted first. It's unclear to me why that would go to the Attorney General in a civil action ahead of the various tax authorities taking their own action. So a lot of this doesn't make a lot of sense, except in the context of politics. So I'm not saying that she doesn't have a case. It's got to go into court. If Donald Trump keeps taking the Fifth Amendment, he may lose by default. And she's seeking $250 million as a judgment. This is, again, it's not a criminal case. She did make a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. That raises another question. if crimes were committed in terms of property crimes, right? You were white collar property crimes, taxes, etc. They would have been, you would think that they would cross local and state laws first before they get to federal law, because federal law generally doesn't deal with local real estate transactions. Those are handled by local and state laws, local and state licensing boards, that sort of thing. So again, the criminal referral to the Department of Justice when the state attorney general isn't pursuing criminal charges on her own really smells more like a stunt. So something to keep in mind. That's the big news this morning, of course. More news, of course. The Russians are doing full mobilization, or not, excuse me, partial mobilization. Vladimir Putin announced this yesterday, and that has created a run on one-way tickets out of Russia. I'm not joking. Reuters is reporting this. A number of news agencies now are reporting that the prices on flights out of Russia especially to non-visa travel countries like Turkey and Armenia have gone through the roof. They're in the thousands of dollars, and in a couple of cases, tens of thousands of dollars, converting from rubles. And they're only going to go up higher because a lot of people want to get out. You've got demonstrations in the streets. AFP is reporting that there were over 200 arrests already being made in demonstrations against the partial mobilization. Putin's really playing with fire with this partial mobilization. And at some point, he's doubling down. He's talking about nuclear weapons now, which is extremely dangerous. He's already lost India and China, which were his two biggest trading partners over this. Last week, India explicitly told him to make peace in Ukraine, because it was ridiculous that Putin had gone to war in the first place. And while Xi Jinping was, friendly, he made it clear that they really want to distance themselves from what Putin is doing in Ukraine. And the idea of a plebiscite on sovereignty is not going to sit well in Beijing, because that sets the precedent for Taiwan declaring independence. And I don't think that that's something that Xi Jinping right now really wants to set a precedent on. Putin's in a lot of trouble. So those are the big stories. Of course, we're following all those stories. Got lots of great content coming up from Jazz Shaw, John Sexton, David Strom, Karen Townsend. Beach Wellborn's probably going to weigh in sometime today. She's doing fantastic. Hoping you're enjoying that. I'm going to be doing the VIP Gold chat. So if you're not already a member of VIP Gold, you'll join up now. You'll find out how to do that at the end of the podcast here. And you can go back and watch all the previous episodes, including today's. And I'm also going to be recording my Amiable Skeptics, the Amiable Skeptics featuring Adam Baldwin. We'll be recording that this afternoon, hopefully releasing the first half tomorrow on Thursday, maybe the second half either on Friday or Monday, depending on timing. And again, that's only VIP. So if you're a VIP member, not VIP Gold, but VIP member, Hot Air VIP, you can access those as well. Hoping you're enjoying those, and I know that you're going to enjoy hearing next from Salena Zito, who gives us the Middle of Somewhere report, talking about John Fetterman, talking about what's going on in Pennsylvania, why Fetterman-Oz is a better candidate than we actually think he is, and why he is actually building momentum in the Pennsylvania race. Salena Zito, also, I tried to get her to talk about the Steelers. That didn't go well. We're going to get Salena on more often, and because she's always a great conversation. There's always a great conversation with Salena Zito, and we really want to get her insight now as the midterms are getting closer and as the 2024 cycle starts to approach, because she's the only person who's actually on the road getting us the nitty-gritty from the campaign trail. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for Salena Zito coming up next. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Joining us today on the road, working hard, maybe the hardest working person in journalism, my friend Salena Zito of the Washington Examiner, New York Post, CNN contributor, just basically, all over the place. She works hard every darn day, and she's joining us from the road. Salena, great talking to you again.
Great to talk to you too, but I have to correct you on one thing. I'm not Post-Gazette anymore, but I am at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, so we can
Ah,
just trade one for the other.
trade one for well, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You were there for years anyway, so this is really, uh,
No, I was at
yeah.
the Pittsburgh Trib. I'm
Oh,
now
that's
at the
right. You were at the
Pittsburgh
Pittsburgh Tribune
Post-Gazette.
Review. That's right, not the Post-Gazette. Oh, that's interesting. I guess I didn't.
I know. I can be that interesting little person, can't I?
Ah, yeah, you're doing all right. See, you're making the rounds. This is great. You're making all the journalistic rounds and get making you're making people miss you and at the same time still be able to access your writing. This is all terrific stuff.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh man, it's great. It's great talking to you. We just don't do this often enough, and I miss when I don't get a
Well,
chance to talk to you.
well, we just need to make it a thing. It needs to be like a thing. Every week we talk.
I think it needs to be a
I'll
thing,
make,
and
I'll,
we'll work
I'll
on
make
that.
cookies. We'll talk.
This is sounding better all the time. I'm really excited. All right, Salena. Got lots to talk about. Want to talk about Joe Biden's Versailles problem. I want to talk about John Fetterman. But the very first thing that we got to talk about is Mitch Trubisky. Really, Mitch Trubisky? What in the hell?
Well, you know, okay. It took me a second to even sort of like process that because I haven't even watched the Steelers, with the exception of watching Ben's last game,
Yeah.
since 2016. I am one of those people. Now, yeah, as y'all know, I cover politics, right? So the last thing I want in the places where I seek respite, where I seek entertainment, where I seek enjoyment, then I want them flooded with politics. And
Right.
the NFL went there, and I went out the door. I was like, that's it. I'm done. Done. I'm just done.
Well, I'm back because it got somewhat better, but unfortunately the Steelers didn't. And you say you haven't watched the Steelers since Big Ben's last game. I'm here to tell you, you haven't missed much. Now they actually did have a really interesting finale to a game last week, where neither the Cincinnati Bengals nor the Pittsburgh Steelers could figure out whether or not they wanted to win a game. So they went all the way through an overtime before they figured it out. But I did have the experience of watching yesterday's mediocrity from the Steelers, and you're not missing much. All right, so I wanted to throw that one
Yeah,
at
no,
you.
well, I look, my problem with the Steelers, outside of the NFL getting like super hyped up with politics, which is why I haven't watched since 2016. My problem with the Steelers, I believe, has probably remained in that Mike Tomlin has been. I'm not saying he's a bad coach. What I am saying is because he's almost the same age, or maybe now a little older than the players, he's too much of their buddy and less than their coach. And when you don't command, I mean, Chuck Noll or Bill Cowher will remind you that he's the coach. So they reminded you there was no friendship there.
Right.
And because of that, there's no sort of line there. I don't think he's a good coach.
Yeah, he might be a better coach down the road, but he's just, yeah. I got to agree with you. I think there's a coaching hurdle here. He's a good coach, but not a great coach, and I think he has problems getting his team in that proper relationship. All right.
Right, because they're buddies.
That's right.
You can't be their buddy.
I have trolled you long enough on the Steelers. So now let's talk about what you're actually working on, all that great work you're actually doing. And I'm going to start with the Fetterman campaign, because I think that Democrats are really going sideways here on John Fetterman. I don't think that Mehmet-Oz is a great candidate for the Republicans, but at least he's comprehensible. And I think Democrats are starting to realize that they've got a real problem with Fetterman, and I'm not sure that they have a way to solve it unless he heals up really fast, and I don't see that happening either.
I just watched 14 minutes of him doing his job as lieutenant governor for the first time since May, and it made me so uncomfortable. He's really, really bad, and it's quite sad. And it's quite sad that people have allowed him to be put in this position. It's sort of tragic. And he had to have an aide to help him with the Pledge of Allegiance. He was closed captioned the entire time, and he was doing a Ron Burgundy, where he was saying, like, interrupt clerk, pause is here, like,
yeah.
And so I'm going to quibble with you on Oz. I've spent thousands of miles with him, gone to almost every county in the state. He has proved to be a very good campaigner.
Interesting.
He does all the things he's supposed to do. He meets with editorial boards of small newspapers. He goes to county fairs. He just jumps out of the car and starts talking to people. He's spontaneous like that. He goes to farms. He's been everywhere. He's been absolutely everywhere. Unfortunately for him, I've just about been the only reporter covering it.
Right.
Now, John Fetterman has a hiccup, and 32 reporters are there from all the national news organizations. And so I think that's why you probably have this perception that he's not doing much, but I will tell you that actually isn't the case. And he has turned out to be a very good campaigner, and here's what I think, here is his quality that I think makes him a good candidate. He is curious. And what do I mean by that? So when he's with people and he doesn't know exactly what they do or doesn't have an understanding of what their town is like, he peppers them with the kinds of questions that draw out a connection and a relationship with the voter. And that is a quality that I don't see a lot of with candidates. And he also never says, I did this, I did that, I'm this, I'm that. He's always talking about what the person does. And I find that voters have found that to be very refreshing, and they have connected with him over his ability to actually be a very good candidate.
And that's probably the reason why we're seeing the polls tighten up as much as they are in Pennsylvania. I mean, this is also probably because they're starting to apply likely voter models to these polls. But but this is, I think part of the thing with Oz was is that when he first started out, and I'm talking about when he was going up against McCormick, and maybe a little bit after the primary. He was still trying to, you got the sense that this was a guy who was still learning the ropes a little bit, which he would, because this is his first political campaign, right? And
yes, he made a lot of stumbles.
Yeah, but he's learning, and that's the trick. And this is the right. Home stretch. So yeah, if you stumble out of the gate, sometimes that's enough to lose. But I think in this situation here, I think, Fetterman's going to have a real problem. I mean, we're still talking about doing debates, right? And he's not going to do a debate until the last week of October, and early voting starts when? End of the month here?
Today.
Oh, today. Yeah. Well, and today's the 19th.
So we don't have traditional early voting, like you go into a place and vote. We have, you can pick up your mail-in ballot.
Right.
But today, what happened today on the Senate floor was just sort of gutting. If anybody saw that and had any sort of skepticism that Fetterman is not up to the job, they can't look at that with a straight face and say, "Oh, he's fine. He'll be fine."
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. Fine. I got to look this up. I haven't seen it yet, but
I'll send it to you. It literally just posted, and you can just find it on the Pennsylvania Senate website. But it is remarkably uncomfortable.
Yeah, and here's This is the thing, that the question that I've been asking myself this entire time is that Democrats had to know, Salena, that this was going to
Oh,
be
they
a
knew.
problem, right?
They knew.
Why didn't they
They knew.
intercede? I mean, you've got Connor Lamb, who certainly, I know he didn't win the primary, but he certainly would have been an effective candidate for them. I mean, did they think that they could just slide on this, or were they fooled by Fetterman's family into thinking that
No,
Fetterman was going
they
to
were not.
recover? Okay, so
No,
what's
they
the,
were
what's
not
what's
full.
the story on that?
Well, because the only person that can take Fetterman out of this is Fetterman.
Well, yeah, that was
That's
yeah.
that's the challenge, and you got to trust me in that Democrats have tried.
Oh, is that right? That's interesting.
Democrats. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, they behind the scenes, you know, but the only person that can take him out of it is Fetterman, and they can't do anything about it. So they have, there are flawed candidates, and then there are candidates that are impaired, and I understand he had a stroke. It's extraordinarily tragic. I've known John since 2006.
Right.
You get to know people as you cover them, and this is very sad with a man and a wife that have 3 young children. However, I think they are doing him a disservice. I'm not even going to blame him. I think his campaign team and his family is doing him a disservice.
Exactly.
By not being honest, but also they're doing the voters a disservice by not being transparent about his condition.
Yeah.
Look, Arlen Specter was our U.S. Senator in Pennsylvania forever. He had a brain aneurysm. He had a triple bypass heart surgery. He had Hodgkin's disease twice.
Yeah.
And you know what? Every time he was sick, there was a doctor standing there giving the press and giving the voters exquisite details. Sometimes details you didn't even want to know. And Bob Casey, our governor for 2 terms, had a liver and heart transplant.
Yeah.
So it is not unprecedented in our state to have an elected official to be impaired. What is unprecedented in our state is that they're not being transparent about it.
Right. And they're not being honest about it. I mean, they've been saying this was minor, that this was just a little hiccup. And we've had people who've had strokes before. I'm trying to think of it. Is it Senator Lujan from New Mexico, who was out for a few weeks, came back, seemed to be fine, and still seems to be fine. And so you look at that and say, well, look, I mean, it's possible that there aren't things that are that there are. This is a stroke that wasn't that significant, and that's what people were thinking in May when the family was saying, oh, look, he's fine. We're just going to take a little time off the campaign trail, make sure he gets a chance to rest up, and we'll be back. Well, clearly he's not fine. Clearly they've been lying about this. And Fetterman's still lying about this.
I don't even know if I can blame him. I think I have to blame the people around him.
Well, right, because you have to wonder how much agency he actually has in this, especially when you hear him talk. I mean, you have to wonder how much he's making these decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. After this last thing that I just watched, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and that's leading to all sorts of questions, right, Salena, about pushing him through like this as a way to just basically have Chuck Schumer control his vote. This is not somebody who, I mean, just honestly speaking, this is not somebody who can contribute to an extensive discussion or debate about policy. This is somebody who's just going to be casting a vote based on what, in part, I guess, on what people, tell him to do.
Yeah. That's not good.
No.
It's the most deliberate body in our government, and it requires an extraordinary amount of communication and detail, and that is not something he appears to have.
No, No,
the ability
unfortunately.
to, yeah, sadly.
Yeah, this is a guy who really should be resting. This is a guy who shouldn't be put
Well,
under
that's
more
the other
stress.
thing. That's the other thing. I can't even imagine the amount of stress this is causing him.
Yeah.
This can't be good for his health.
It cannot be good for his health. This is not good for his health. And just on a humanitarian basis, it's unfortunate if Pennsylvania doesn't allow the party to intercede. I wasn't clear on that, so I actually wasn't sure how much control they would have, but I suspected that it might be that the candidate himself would have to agree to this before you could replace him.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that should have been done 3 months ago. Have them withdraw, have
Yeah.
the party select another nominee, and have a real debate on the policies and the issues that matter to Pennsylvanians. Pennsylvania
Yeah.
deserves a senator that not just represents their views, but also is capable of handling the job. I mean, and both of those things have to be in place. And if they don't
I
have
mean,
an
we have
option for
yeah.
that,
Yeah. I agree. I mean, we have a history of having these great U.S. senators. Arlen Specter, Hugh Scott, who was the guy that told Nixon, yeah, we're not backing you anymore, so you need to resign. I mean, these are formidable, robust lawmakers, and that is not um, what Fetterman capabilities are presenting.
right? That's exactly right. All right, so Salena, that's the one story I wanted to talk to you about, but I also wanted to talk about the Versailles piece that you wrote because I found that really interesting. Because I got to tell you, apparently I have a problem too. Because when I read that, I read it as Versailles, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's good. I'm thinking you were just from the headline, right? I saw the headline. I thought I got to read this because this is going to be fun. This is going to be about a Marie, Joe Biden's Marie Antoinette-ish type of let them drive electric vehicles thing. The thing from the 60 Minutes interview yesterday where he says, "Oh, inflation was only an inch. That didn't hurt anybody."
Right.
I thought that's what this was going to be about. Yours is actually a lot more interesting, and it's not Versailles. It's Versailles.
It's Versailles. So there's a Versailles, Pennsylvania. There's one in Kentucky. There's one in Ohio. There's one in Indiana. They're pronounced Versailles mainly because of the early Scots-Irish settlers. The Scots had a tendency to emphasize the second syllable and not the first. But I suspect, and this is just speculation, that it also has to do with nothing in America was going to ever replicate Versailles, which was the most extravagant palace in Paris. And as you point out, Marie Antoinette, King Louis, they kind of lost their heads. They were very out of touch with their people. And my point was that Joe Biden thinks he's governing Versailles rather than Versailles. And the people that placed him in office are the people that live in towns like Versailles, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky. Maybe not those exact voters, but he would not have won had he not got enough working class voters from
Right.
Pennsylvania and specifically Pennsylvania. And from the inflation, and like the thing that really got under my skin was watching him having that event in the South Lawn, and everyone's partying up about this Inflation
Right.
Reduction Act that doesn't reduce inflation, so it's BS from the onset. But also, it's at the same time when the Dow drops almost 1,300 points. That means our pensions, that means our savings, right? But also that, he poo-poos the inflationary costs that are costing the average American the cost of a Mercedes every month, over $450 a month more than we paid a year ago.
Yep.
And it's just stunning to me. And then he has this event in Detroit, and he goes on an electric Cadillac, which costs $62,000, 62,990, because you know how car dealers always make it 990 right at the
Right.
end.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
he's lecturing everyone about using electric cars in a zip code where the average medium wage is 32,000 a year. Please stop. Just stop. You're so disconnected from everybody.
He's even disconnected from the event itself. I mean, whose idea was it to drag James Taylor up there of all people? If you're gonna have a celebration, get whatever the remainder of Earth, Wind, and Fire is, and do Celebrate, right? Something like that. Instead, he's got James
Right.
Taylor up there doing a song about suicide and his band breaking up. I mean,
oh my God, what is he? It's just I'm stunned at how disconnected. I read this piece back when Biden was running. He had made this trip from Delaware County to Pittsburgh, and I said, for an extra 2.5 hours, take the back road, don't fly, and see what's going on in this country.
Yep.
And I took, as always, I took a lot of flack for that, but it turns out that ends up being exactly what his problem is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and this is a guy who sold himself as Scranton Joe, right? Still sells himself as Scranton Joe. I'm Scranton Joe. I'm just an ordinary guy from Scranton, PA, and he's out there dancing on the grave of the economy as Wall Street loses 1,300 points. Now, and we got to talk about the original error of this, right? Which is to schedule this thing on the day that the Consumer Price Index report was going to come out. I mean, this is not a mystery, right? This is not a mystery. Right. These are scheduled. We knew that, last Tuesday, excuse me, that you're going to see the Consumer Price Index report because it's scheduled to come out that day. And that's the day that they decided to hold the Inflation Reduction Act celebration without apparently having a clue as to what that report was going to say and how it was going to impact the markets. I mean, that is sheer stupidity. This is, I don't know a better example of this White House and Joe Biden playing checkers in a three-dimensional chess world than that decision. That decision alone. Yeah, hold it the day before, right? Get your celebration out of the way, then you can withstand the report. But to hold it, I mean, that to me was absolutely stunning that they had decided to do that. Hold that celebration just literally like 6 hours after the report was due to come out, and I knew it was going to be bad. It couldn't be good. I mean, if you knew what the fundamentals were, you knew that report was going to be bad, and nobody at this White House, Salena, seemed to give a damn.
No, they don't. That's why they are Versailles.
Exactly. That's
why
the point of your column. Yeah, they're Versailles rather than Versailles.
Yeah, they are Versailles. They don't care what the little people think. They literally laugh in their faces. That 60-minute interview should make every Democrat say, "Oh, sweet fancy Moses, we are in trouble." Because this guy has all the wrong messages.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you could message that worse than what they did last week, including the James Taylor thing, which was just fire and rain. Didn't anybody listen to the lyrics of that? Didn't anybody this is like deciding that you're gonna sing Lola at a family values concert. Actually, I have this story of a friend of mine, right, I was working with him. We were both like 18, 19 years old, and he's singing this song, and I said, "You know what that song's about, right?" He says, "No." He says, it's about a girl named Lola. I said, no, it's about a guy named Lola. He goes, no, it's not. And I had to, I mean, this is before Google, right? This is before the internet. I actually had to sit there and sing every single word of the lyrics because I knew the lyrics to it in order to
Oh
demonstrate to him what the song
my.
was actually about. And I mean, it was no big deal. We were laughing, and but I mean, it would be like asking one of the surviving Kinks to sing Lola at your family values celebration. It's like, maybe you should do your homework, man.
Oh my stars. Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you saw his interview, right? I mean, you took a look at, or at least you've read reports of it, right?
Of the Biden interview?
Yeah, the 60 Minutes interview,
Yeah, yeah. That was very uncomfortable to watch.
wasn't it?
Uh, it was really it's very much like Fetterman in that
Yes.
you want to say, why are y'all letting this guy do this, because he's really struggling. And it just makes you super uncomfortable because he I mean, how many things did he say in that speech that he had, the White House had to clean up within the next 5 minutes?
Oh, well, there was Taiwan. There was the pandemic. There was, I mean, Taiwan especially, though. I mean, and
Yeah,
it's
and
not the
that's
first
like
time
the
with Taiwan.
19th time.
Yeah.
That's like the 19th time that they've had to clean that up.
Yeah. I mean,
When you keep making that same mistake like 19 times, there's a problem.
well, what I noticed in this, and I didn't watch it end to end, right? I've watched clips and I've seen clips of this, which, just because I wasn't going to spend my Sunday night watching Joe Biden on TV. But what comes across to me is that this is a guy who's really slowed up. And I'm glad that you raised the Fetterman thing because I think it applies here too. Is that he's just not up to this job. He isn't
Right.
he isn't up to he isn't up to the nuances of this job. He's not up to the rigors of the intellectual rigors of this job. And I mean, my feeling about Joe Biden is he was never up to the intellect. Even when he was a younger guy, he wasn't up to the intellectual rigors of this. But
Right.
but it's worse now because of his age and the fact that he is just physically. I mean, just it looks like he's wandering around aimlessly when he's walking with Scott Pelley. He just has that odd look on his face. And, for those of us who've had elderly relatives, it kind of looks a little familiar.
We know that look,
Yeah.
right? We
Yep.
we know that look, and and we don't want to see that look in the man who's leading the most important country in the world.
Right. It's exactly right.
Just think of our position globally, but also just as ourselves, within ourselves. And we have a lot of crises going on right now. And we also have worldwide crises, Ukraine and Russia, China. I swear every time I read anything about Greece and Turkey, I feel like they're going to go to war. And so there are a lot of problems going on out there, and we're supposed to be led from the top in terms of being capable of managing them. And I think he proved to be incapable of managing serious things. And I'll just go back to Afghanistan
Yep.
and how tragically and horribly that happened and unfolded. And by the way, the tragedies haven't ended. There are thousands and thousands of fixers over there and translators and people who had the backs of our men and women in the military, and we have left them behind.
Yep.
We have left them behind, and that is a stain on our country's reputation.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. It is absolutely despicable what happened with that. And Salena, I know that we're just about out of time here, but I think that's a good final point on which to rest this. But I do want you to tell people how they can find you, where they can find you, and where you're going next. What are you going to be doing next?
Probably just Pennsylvania and Ohio, because both
Yeah.
are really intense. Everyone can find me at salenazito.com, SALENAZITO. You can sign up for the emails. They're free, they're fun, and they're not fattening. And but if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see a lot of fattening things. I am not on Twitter because that's where your soul goes to die, and I refuse to hold on to my soul. And I hope people jump on and read some of the work I've been doing.
Well, they should. And SalenaZito.com is where you just go there, and it's a one-stop shop for every place that Salena is at. And Salena, thanks so much for joining us. And we will work on doing this on a weekly or semi-weekly basis so that we can hear more from you. I miss you so much. I don't get a chance
to have some middle of somewhere reports. I just did an interview with Nikki Haley on the road. Wow. I was out in South Dakota with Governor Kristi Noem. I was in Illinois following a congressional candidate in a Dem seat that I think the Republicans are going to take. I was in Missouri, but I'm in Pennsylvania and Ohio a lot right now.
Yeah, next time we get you on, we're going to talk about Ohio. We haven't had a chance to talk about Ohio yet. We're going to talk more about Ohio. That's an important race out there, the Senate race, also the gubernatorial race. Although I think Mike DeWine's got that pretty much in hand.
He's got that locked up.
Yeah,
he's fine. I also think J.D. Vance is just fine.
Well,
people underestimate.
I think people are just misreading the moment. You know what I want to talk about next time we talk is the electoral context. Because I think it's a distraction campaign, but I've kept you long enough, and SalenaZito.com is where you can go. Thanks so much for being with us today, Salena.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching or listening to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and through the Town Hall Media Player, or you can just come to hotair.com and watch my podcast for free. However, I'd also love to have you join us as members of our VIP and VIP Gold programs. That allows us to defeat the stranglehold that big tech has on information and get you the best information that we possibly can. Plus, we have a lot of new value-added content coming to us from Town Hall Media stars and my good friend Adam Baldwin. He and I are doing the video series, The Amiable Skeptics. It's 1 hour of discussion a week, strictly for our VIP and VIP Gold members. Plus, we have our VIP Gold chat with Kem Edwards every Wednesday afternoon at 1:30 p.m. We'd love to have you as members. Be sure to join up. Thanks again for watching the Ed Morrissey Show podcast.